Red Bull is facing major backlash after a controversial incident at the Mexico GP. Max Verstappen's aggressive driving and team mistakes have fans and experts questioning their tactics. From penalties to frustrated drivers, it's been a weekend full of drama for the team. Ferrari is ending this year strongly and surprisingly. With Charles Leclerc, SHL, and Carlos Sainz dominating the last two races, Ferrari has put itself in a strong position to challenge for the Constructors Championship. If they had sorted their form earlier in the season, they might have even been in the running for the Drivers' Championship by now. But as it stands, they are setting themselves up for success next year. Despite Ferrari's success at the Mexican Grand Prix, their win didn't come without some help. Lando Norris, who was pushing hard for a podium finish, was very close to catching up with race winner Carlos Sainz. But Norris's progress was blocked when Max Verstappen made a controversial move that hurt Red Bull's chances in the race. This caused a massive collapse for Red Bull, and many felt that Verstappen's actions played a big role in it. Max Verstappen's actions on the track raised serious concerns. Lando Norris himself even said, "I'm going to end up in the wall in a minute," referring to Verstappen's reckless driving. On lap 11, Verstappen forced Norris off the track and then nearly collided with him when trying to regain his position. Verstappen's aggressive driving, which has often been criticized by other drivers, fans, and teams, is once again a topic of discussion after this incident. Moreover, Verstappen's behavior at the Mexican Grand Prix caused significant problems for Lando Norris, earning him a 10-second penalty. Verstappen's actions not only ruined Norris's first stint, but also severely damaged his tyres, making it much harder for Norris to continue his strong progress up the field. In the early laps, Norris looked likely to challenge for a top spot, but Verstappen's reckless driving thwarted that, slowing him down and potentially ending his chances for a better finish. Verstappen's aggressive driving is not a new issue. It's something we've seen time and time again. His tactics often seem to target his championship rivals, and it's hard to ignore the fact that the most intense clashes occur when he's fighting a driver who could challenge his position, especially when it comes to the championship. Whether or not the challenge is late in the season, Verstappen seems willing to take extreme measures to prevent rivals from gaining ground. Norris expressed his frustrations clearly over the radio, saying, "I was ahead the whole way through the corner. This guy is dangerous. It's the same as last time. I'll be in the wall in a minute." His comments reflect the frustration many drivers feel when Verstappen's tactics put their safety and race results at risk. McLaren's CEO speaks out. It wasn't just Norris who was upset. McLaren CEO Zak Brown also voiced his concerns. He called Verstappen's driving dangerous, stating, "This is something I have witnessed a number of times this year." Brown made it clear that Verstappen's actions were becoming increasingly ridiculous and dangerous. He also praised the FIA stewards for taking action, but insisted that there needs to be more consistent and clean racing moving forward. Following the controversial incidents at the Mexican Grand Prix, the FIA has scheduled an end-of-season meeting in Qatar to discuss racing standards. However, many feel this is too little, too late, considering the ongoing issues. The timing of this meeting, after Verstappen's numerous penalties, leaves little confidence in the effectiveness of the FIA's actions. The fact that Verstappen's behavior has sparked so much backlash only underscores the need for clearer and more consistent guidelines in the future. After receiving his first penalty, Verstappen's reaction was far from apologetic. He didn't try to hide his smugness when his engineer, GP, informed him of the 10-second penalty, saying, "10, that's quite impressive." GP's response was a dismissive remark about all the complaints, calling it a filthy weekend for Red Bull. His flippant attitude toward the penalties raised further concerns about the team's accountability. It felt as if Verstappen was almost mocking the stewards, showing a lack of respect for the decision. Verstappen wasn't the only Red Bull driver to face penalties. His teammate, Sergio Perez, also received a penalty for a false start and for forcing Racing Point's Lance Stroll off the track. For those who don't quite get it, especially Perez's more loyal fans, this situation highlights just how chaotic Red Bull's weekend was. Verstappen, in particular, received more penalties during this race weekend than he had in the entire second half of 2021, further adding to his reputation for controversial behavior. After the race, Verstappen defended his driving, claiming he was simply doing what was necessary to compensate for his car's lack of speed. He argued that once the Ferraris and Norris had gained an advantage, the race was effectively lost for him. "When you're slower, you're forced into these kinds of positions," Verstappen said, implying that he had no choice but to act aggressively. He also stated that he wouldn't give up easily, indicating his strong desire to fight for every position, regardless of the tactics involved. This defense, however, didn't do much to alleviate criticism, especially after the penalties had piled up, leaving many to question his methods. While agreeing with the penalties imposed on him, Max voiced his concern about his race pace, which he felt was far from good. "The only thing is 20 seconds is quite a lot," he admitted, referring to the hefty penalty he received. Despite the penalties, Verstappen pointed out that Red Bull didn't stand a chance of fighting at the front due to their poor race pace. He acknowledged that, even with the penalties, they were unable to compete at the top, expressing concern about the team's performance. "It was really not good, and it's something we need to analyze." However, he wasn't overly worried about the championship, showing confidence in the team's ability to improve moving forward. Max is, of course, allowed to defend his position, but the way he went about it raised eyebrows. His actions during the race, especially with Lando Norris, went beyond typical racing defense. His aggressive tactics were criticized for being overly risky and dangerous. It's clear that Verstappen's behavior sparked frustration from both his competitors and fans. Red Bull's diplomatic response. Christian Horner, Red Bull's team principal, was also diplomatic in his response when questioned about Verstappen's controversial early moves. His answers were vague, often referring the matter to the stewards for clarification. This hesitant, polite response from Horner and the rest of the Red Bull team suggested one thing: they knew they had made significant mistakes during this race weekend. There was no attempt to justify Verstappen's actions, and it seemed like they were trying to avoid further controversy. It's undeniable that Red Bull's actions this weekend caused them more harm than good. Even after Verstappen's 20-second penalty, he still managed to finish ahead of his teammate, Sergio Perez. For Perez, this race was supposed to be a chance to turn his season around, especially with the support of his home crowd. Unfortunately, he was out in Q1 and struggled throughout the race. He failed to make any significant progress through the field, unlike McLaren's Oscar Piastri, who had started from the back and made an impressive climb up the rankings. Sergio Perez's performance at his home Grand Prix was far from what Red Bull had hoped for. Instead of focusing on climbing the ranks and fighting for a better position, he appeared distracted by the presence of Liam Lawson, the Kiwi who had been eyeing his seat. Perez's obsession with Lawson seemed to affect his concentration, and it was clear that his focus was split between defending his position and watching his potential replacement closely. Perez even commented on Lawson's late clash with another driver, a distraction that may have further disrupted his race. On the other hand, Liam Lawson, though not a full-time Red Bull driver, showed more promise than Perez. Lawson managed to challenge for the fastest lap, something Perez should have been doing at his home Grand Prix. In an attempt to take the fastest lap back from Lawson, Perez made a petty move that was widely criticized. His actions were likened to entering a junior golf competition as an adult, an embarrassing display of desperation. While Lawson didn't ultimately secure the fastest lap, it was a reminder of how far Perez had fallen in comparison to his teammate. The outcome for Red Bull in the Mexican Grand Prix wasn't entirely unexpected, but the way they reached P3 in the constructors' standings was baffling. The team's collective mistakes were evident, from poor race strategy to Verstappen's controversial driving. Red Bull tried to play the victim card, but this tactic didn't suit their reputation as champions. The race was a head loss for the team, and it highlighted the growing frustration within Red Bull as they failed to capitalize on their strong start to the season. Verstappen managed to fight back and claim 6th place, keeping his championship hopes alive. However, his antics at the Mexican Grand Prix have tarnished his reputation. What could have been remembered as his cleanest and most mature championship season has now been overshadowed by his desperate tactics, especially his aggressive driving at a crucial moment. Before the weekend, many considered this to be his hardest-fought championship, where he had to overcome both external rivals and internal team struggles. But after the events in Mexico, that narrative has changed. As the season heads into its final races, the battle for the Constructors Championship is far from over. Both McLaren and Ferrari have capable drivers who can fight for the top spots. McLaren's Oscar Piastri has shown great potential, but his inconsistent qualifying performances leave him vulnerable to attacks from his teammate, Carlos Sainz, and others. So what do you think of the major backlash of Red Bull after the massive Mexico GP incident? Comment below and subscribe for more.